Donna Woodwell, thank you for joining me for our interview.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Vic.
Thanks. So I have the same questions for you that I have for all of the astrologers that I'm doing in this series of interviews, and that's what kind of makes it interesting. People can watch the series and see how different people answer the same questions. So the first question, my first question always is, how would you describe the kind of astrology that you do, and what's special about the way you do it?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest question people ever ask astrologers, because we come from such diverse places. I actually came to astrology from my shamanic studies. I got very sick when I was in college, and to find healing, it was a sort of backwards path that took me through the world of biofeedback and meditation, and eventually landed me in what this world would call shamanic studies, although we didn't call it that ourselves. So we did a lot of work in meditation and a lot of work in community and circles and ceremony, connecting to everything, the spirits and the ancestors and the rocks and the trees, as part of my own healing process. My teacher worked in a Native American tradition. But we were all very well aware that though she had married into a tribe and had children with the tribe, and had permission of her tribe to share what she learned from her experience of over a decade of living on the reservation with the world, we were a bunch of white girls. And, you know, for me, it would have been really ripping off the reservation if I went and tried to do what she did without any of that cultural context. So what the tribe suggested was for all of us to go and find our own tradition. Well, that begs the question, you know, when you are 20-something white chick who lives in Texas, what is your tradition? What was my tradition? And that led me, of course, to the bookstore, because what else do we have? And so I just started taking books down and reading them and reading them and until I went through everything, you know, from witchcraft to tarot to you name it. If it was in the New Age section, I'm sure I read it at some point in time. But I fell in astrology as something I just fell in love with very quickly. When I was a little kid, I loved the stars. I thought about being an astronaut. And I've always loved just looking up at the sky. But the one thing I could not understand when I started learning astrology, the math was easy, but why was nobody talking to planets? I mean, I'd just come from a world where we were talking to trees and rocks and things, and we were talking to the moon on some level. And it just occurred to me that, well, you know, moon, sun, what about the rest of them? And so I was connecting to them in a very organic, holistic, spiritual kind of way, it took me, you know, 10 or 12 years to realize that I wasn't the only one doing it this way, and that that I needed a more holistic approach to astrology. I learned a lot from when I met a Vedic astrologer who was working with I think we talked about this before, a great big board with shells that they poured out, and they did some prayers, and like I could feel the energy shift. I'm like, yes, that. Why is that not being done by all the people around me? And then when she went, after she did that ceremony and then moved over to her computer, I'm going, can we go back where we were before? Because that made sense to me. So yes, I'm a traditional Western astrologer. I have a lot of Hellenistic, medieval, Renaissance. I love astrological magic in the kind of work that I do. But I'm also trained as a journalist. So I take what I do and I put it in a language that other people understand. Most people don't care what kind of ingredients I put into the stew. They care about whether or not we are reducing suffering in people's lives. And so when I work with clients, I generally focus more on that than all of the other woo-woo stuff, even if while I'm talking to them, I'm hearing Mercury, yammer, or something else is going on in my background. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's the most truthful answer I can give you.
So what you're saying is you use like Renaissance medieval astrology in a very magical and shamanistic way?
I think so. That's a good summary.
I'm a good editor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you talked already about how you get involved in astrology, how you got involved in astrology. How did it go? You kind of like, so like a lot of people are involved in astrology, but few people do it as a profession.
This is
So,
true.
and people would be interested, I'm sure people are interested to know, like, how does one become a professional astrologer instead of just like a fan of astrology? How did that
Yeah,
happen for you?
I don't think any, teenager says, I want to be an astrologer when I grow up. At least not in my world. I mean, that was, if you'd asked me when I was in college that I would be a professional astrologer, I would have laughed at you. It wasn't even remotely on my radar. And it wasn't until I got sick and had that health crisis. I had lost 20 or 30 pounds. It was awful. And then I had, 10 years of having like two lives. My one life, I was working in professional high-end fundraising with suits and everything else, and people who had millions of dollars and asking them for money. And then I had this whole secondary life where I was doing, my shamanic and my magical studies, and there was never like a way that they crossed over. It just didn't happen. So one day after I went into, and I had a staff by that time. I was like mid-level management. I went into a retreat that we had called for my staff, and they were all really happy, like, oh, things are going so well. Thank you for this retreat. And I walked out going, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't know where I belong, but I don't belong here. And one thing led to another, and I finally quit with no plan, which is so very much not like me. I'm plan girl. And I had no intention of doing anything. And since I had time off, I thought, well, what am I going to do with myself? And so I was hanging out reading books, and my friends would come up and, hey, why don't you read my chart? I'm like, okay. And, after I did that a few times, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, maybe I should start charging money. And then from there, I'm like, well, if I'm going to really do this professionally, maybe I should meet other astrologers. maybe it shouldn't be just about me and my books. So Austin didn't have an astrological society at that point in time. So I was a professional in, nonprofits and setting them up. So what the heck, I'll just build one. So I found out that I got pregnant at the same time. So I realized that people were going to have to come to me rather than me going all over the place. So I built that. And in the process, I got noticed by one of the National Astrological Associations. And so they gave me a phone call within like 6 months of creating the local organization, say, hey, you want to sit on our national board? And I said, I don't know, I'm like brand new to astrology professionals, and I don't really know anybody. And you guys are all famous. I see your names on the books on my shelf. You want me on your board? And they said, yes, please. And it turned out that they needed a lot of help with their nonprofit management, and I had a lot of experience with that. So there was a reason I got. So from there, I got exposed to a world of all of the most famous astrologers that you hear about, and I had them on my speed dial. And then I ran away from that organization screaming because I'm like, I need to do my own stuff. Leave me alone. And swore I would never do it again. And then another organization came knocking and said, please, 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 will you help? And I said, no. And they said, but please, 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 please. And eventually I caved and I said, okay, fine. I will run and I will lose. But I won't feel guilty that I said no, because I ran and see, I lost, but then I won. So then I had another 3 or 4 years on that board. And eventually I, in that process was surrounded by professional astrologers. And I realized I had a lot more business experience than most of them. So it just became, for me, I was lucky because I did know how to run a business. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of astrologers who want to be ones. They don't have any business experience at all. So I ended up, because I was a professional writer, working full-time doing astrology columns, horoscopes for famous astrologers, some of which was not named by me, because some of these astrologers, you can't possibly do all their work. So I was like ghostwriting for some of them, and then under my own name. And eventually that led into working for Astrology Hub and producing courses for them. And so I I am well and truly a professional astrologer now. And although most of my work comes out of teaching and writing than it does clients, I still do have a reasonably steady client base.
Wow.
So how'd that go?
Very cool. So when you do deal with clients, what are your favorite things to deal with? What are your favorite kind of issues to read for?
That's a really interesting question because I went to school to be a journalist. And so I know most of my heart is always going to be in teaching and not in client work. So I'm very picky when I see clients. And most of my clients, they fall into at least a few major categories. I see a lot of intellectuals like me who are in the university system or something. They tend to find me because I speak their language. I see a lot of people who are putting together business plans and they're looking to launch things and they need help picking out dates for different kinds of things they want to do, auspicious days to open the new restaurant or to send out their new job application or whatever. And I see a lot of people who are in the psychic community, the acupuncturists and massage therapists and things, because I had so much training in psychic arts. And so they're trying to figure out how to manage themselves. So I feel like I'm always doing astrology plus something else that I happen to have background and training in. It's not usually just having people show up, Oh, and I do people who a lot of my students who are learning astrology and they want to have what's a reading like and teach me about astrology or teach me how to give readings. And so it's more like it's not just reflecting on their chart and what they're working through. It's helping them understand how to deliver information to a client in a way that's useful to the client. So it's a combination.
So do you screen clients?
Yes.
What's your criteria where you'll say, no, I'm not going to do this?
The little voice in my head that says no.
Yeah, that's
really,
it.
There's no. If someone's asking for something that I do not feel I am ideal to give them, if they're clearly looking for, someone who practices evolutionary astrology because of the way they're asking their questions, I will just say, I'm not the right astrologer for you. And I'll give them a list of, here are all some great astrologers who will work with your questions in a way that would be more useful to you. Because I have a lot of respect for, a lot of my astrologer friends. And I know I'm not like the end all for everyone. I don't take clients who I feel like I'm not the right person. Like they're looking for a therapist. And I'm like, you're looking for a therapist, not an astrologer. Here's some good therapists. And I'm not one of them. I turned someone down when they started yelling at me on the phone. I actually, at one point I also had a hypnosis practice. And they were like in love with their sister and would I please help them? And I said, no. And I said, I don't have enough experience to be able to help you with your issues. Here's a therapist. And they said, but you'll never learn. And then I was like, I knew that was the right answer. I also have a money back guarantee policy that I mean, it's posted on my website. I don't talk about it all the time, but there have been several people that have come for readings and I have given them their money back because I clearly did not explain to them what astrology could do, especially in the beginning. And as soon as I realized that in the reading, I will stop the reading and say, look, I'm really sorry, but you are looking for things that I don't feel like I can answer for you. And so it's on the house.
Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of like what might spur you to say that?
I had one woman who was really, I mean, from my perspective, she was really, really blocked on something and she was not listening to anything I said. She just didn't want to hear it. In which case I'm like, she doesn't, if she's got her fingers in her ears, I mean, I suppose I could say she paid for me, she paid for my time, but I didn't feel right about taking her money. I just figured it was going to create bad blood for her, me, and the whole universe. And so I said, I'm not sure the astrology is what you need, and I'm not sure I'm what you need from an astrologer. I had another woman, it was years ago, call me back up and yell at me because I didn't explain to her that she wasn't going to pay her mortgage. And I said, I didn't know you weren't going to pay your mortgage. I'm really sorry about that. Well, you should have told me. I'm like, you know what? It had even been like a year and a half since I'd seen her. And I said, you know what? Here you go. Here's your check. I just sent her a check and said, I do have a money back guarantee policy. I want everybody to be happy. And it's my way of feeling the integrity of what I'm doing. And I think it creates for better readings overall, because my clients who come back know that I will, if it's not working or I'm not the right person, I'm going to send them where I think they're right. In that sense, I direct traffic. My teacher, one of my magic teachers, used to say that all the time. She's like, I just direct traffic. And I never really understood what she meant until I started doing readings. And then I realized I direct traffic. I'm directing traffic this way, and hey, here's my referral book, go this way. And some of what I do is just helping nudge people in directions that they may not have had the opportunity before. And I have a huge network of people from all the things that I've done in my life. And so, when I'm starting to pull off books on totally different subjects that have nothing to do with astrology, but it's what people need, they're like, wow, I had no idea I was going to get this when I came to you. And I'm like, full service astrologer. So,
So on this topic of networks, right? You also had mentioned how you felt that it was really important for you to meet other astrologers, and you have a big network of people. So let's talk a little bit about that network, that of astrological culture. I would like you to tell us what you feel is the most inspiring about that network, and also what is the biggest maybe challenge or stumbling block in that current culture of astrological people.
Well, it's changing rapidly. So that's one thing everybody should realize, is that not long ago in the United States, I don't know how it is in other countries, but I know in the United States, because I have been up in the upper echelons of the corridors of power in the formal community, so to speak. I know a lot of people who've been around they've been practicing astrology longer than I've been alive. And that's a long time now. That's a long time. So, astrology here used to be largely run by housewives, because they had spouses that could support them, and they had time to run all of these organizations and do astrology kind of on the side. And then we started having a few more professional astrologers that, ran software companies or ran chart businesses or something to support the community, coming up in the 80s. But by the early 2000s, all the new people coming into astrology, they worked. They were all working full-time jobs. And so there's a kind of clash coming into the community between the people who had been here since the 60s and the new people who are coming up, and trying to have that, there's a little culture clash within the community. Now, a lot of that old guard is just too old to run all these things. And so what's happening is that the formal community it has been since, when was I on the board? I'd say the high point of the membership was at least 10, 15 years ago by now. They've all been contracting and shrinking because we have the internet and we have Facebook, and there's other ways to meet and greet and network with astrologers than just the formal astrological community. So there are a lot of astrologers now who are doing extremely well, and they have internet followings of 60, 70, 80,000 people, and they have nothing to do with the formal astrological community. And so I don't know where that's going to go in the long run. I would imagine that until the formal groups recognize that their reason for existence, which was when there was no internet, if you wanted to talk to other astrologers, you typed up your article on a typewriter and you put it in an envelope with a stamp and you sent it off to the central location, and they looked at your article and then they took it and they retyped it on a typewriter into a newsletter, and then they mailed it back out again, and everybody got to hear that. Or before there were personal computers, that's how you got information about charts. You wrote off and they told you what time it was in the location, checking their card catalogs of information. Because and when you had new birth information, you sent it to the central repository and they looked it up for you, and then you sent it back. So we don't live in that world anymore. So all these organizations that grew up with that model in mind of being the central communication hub, or having like a big conference so that people could see each other once a year, what does that mean in the internet age? You and I can sit here on opposite sides of the planet and have this conversation, which was never possible before. And I don't think they have really caught up. Like the formal community has caught up to this, and they're working on it. That's kind of why it's so much fun to work with organizations like Astrology Hub, bringing in really the internet and what it means. And meeting astrologers through Facebook, you can now all of a sudden talk to people that you never would have been able to access before, because you were too shy, or you wouldn't have run across them, or maybe you would have seen them at a conference. But now you can, like, hey, how's it going? And so I think we live in an exciting time for astrology. I mean, technology is giving us a chance to bring astrology to the world in a way that, now there's an app for that. People can get an app and they can look up their own star charts for like $3. And how exciting is that? I think the potential for something new and marvelous is, we haven't seen anything like this since the invention of the printing press.
So you're saying that maybe the challenge in the current astrological community is how to remain relevant or become relevant, or leverage the modern realities of communication?
I think, again, I don't know how it is in other parts of the world. And in astrology in the United States, I mean, newspapers like the New York Times and other ones are writing like, wow, there's this huge popular resurgence in astrology, at least a pop version of astrology. And depending on who you're talking to, it's either a terrible thing because it signifies the breakdown of the American educational system, or a fun thing because it's an interesting and more holistic vision and a way to look at your life. I mean, I personally think that's why astrology is having a little bit of a renaissance right now, is because it is one of those spirit sciences that allows you to not just focus on one half of your brain. It's not just intellectual, it's not just spiritual, it's somewhere between the two of them. And that's what our culture needs right now so desperately, is a way to synthesize, because challenges that our culture is facing requires us to think in new ways. And astrology is designed to do that. And even if it's not astrology per se that we need, it's how astrology helps us to think about problems. That is what we need. And so ergo, I'm like all for bringing it back into the culture, because it will have ripple effects that we don't entirely understand. If we can abuse the planet, it's in part because we think the planet is a dead thing. And astrology, at least taken to its logical conclusion, says, no, it's not a dead thing. Everything is conscious and alive. In some way, we are participating in this dance. And if everything is conscious and alive, you can't, throw your garbage on top of it or throw it into the ocean quite the same way. Without the same, you have to think a little bit more about it.
All right. Let's move into Donna Woodwell's world of philosophy.
Okay.
Let's find out how you think on the inside. So I'll start with kind of an external approach to that question. Do you feel that you have like a particular religious background or philosophical school that you identify with?
I grew up in the Methodist Church, and when I was in college, I was studying Latin American studies, and I jumped from a more Protestant background to the Catholic Church, and I actually converted to Catholicism, and I spent some time actually hanging out with all the Jesuits at the Jesuit Retreat Center in Michigan at the time, and that was super awesome. Um, and so my spiritual practice was, under the auspices of that St. Ignatian spiritual exercises, which was really powerful for me. When I got down here and right before I got sick, I actually left the church. One thing had led to another. My guitar got stolen out of a locked cabinet in a locked church, in a locked office, and I figured that was my moment to say that I didn't belong there anymore, since I had nothing to play in the choir anymore. And so I ended up focusing more on my shamanic practice. Now I don't know where I fit, because I see there's so much beauty and inspiration in so many different traditions that from a formal perspective, I feel equally at home in a church or a mosque or, the Hindu temple with the Navagrahas. I'm happy in any of them because there's a presence there. And so I don't have those formal ties the way I used to. And I feel like everything is alive and we're all on this journey together. And we all have something to add. So, if pushed, I will call myself a pluralist, or I might call myself heretical. It just depends on who I'm talking to and the mood that I'm in. So
You're an Orthodox heretic.
I could be an Orthodox heretic. Sure, that sounds good. I could be a Hermeticist, or I could be a Neoplatonist. It just depends on the day.
So you play guitar?
I did play the guitar. I actually sang in coffee houses. Can you believe it? When I was in college. Unfortunately, I was in a car accident right at the certain time that I got on the astrology board. And the airbag broke my left hand and shattered it into tiny little fragments on one of my fingers. So even though I had a miraculous reconstructive surgeon, my finger is now rotated. So it's very difficult to hold that fretboard the way I used to be able to. So,
but you still play? You still play?
I can play a little bit, and after half an hour or something, it really does hurt. But I figured at least I can type, and so it could have been a lot worse. But that is one thing that I do. I'm a little sad. I think about playing the piano sometimes. It won't have the same problem. I may just switch, but
we'll try.
We'll see.
Okay, so now, what do you feel from your Neoplatonic Orthodox heretic point of view? What do you feel is the purpose for being alive? Why are we alive? Why are we here?
One of my favorite authors is Madeleine L'Engle. And she has a great quote that says, the definition of, you'll have to check my pronunciation, Ananda. Ananda, is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah, very good.
And she says, in my definition, it's the joy without which the universe would cease to exist. And that there is a certain just amazing creativity and blissfulness in that creativity that undergirds everything around us. And that's when I sit and meditate and everything is really still, that's where I end up, in this stream of abundant creativity. And so when you ask me why are we here, I'm going to say things like to create, to play, to be in this place where we're in a cosmos that can endlessly spin out different forms and try out different things. And we're here because it's fun, which is why I get so irritated sometimes when I look around and go, it's supposed to be fun. What are you doing to make it unfun? Because it was supposed to be fun. So maybe that's naive of me, but I still find some comfort in that, even, given the way the world looks sometimes.
Great. All right, so now let's go with this question of everything's supposed to be fun. Now, let's say I like to have fun by cutting people's fingers off.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, so that's bad, right? So what's the difference then between good and bad?
It's an excellent question. And it's also because it's a difficult question. I do think that for most people, there is some inherent sense of human ethics. Because we do have, it doesn't matter what culture you look in, if you study all the different cultures, that there are some very similar things that they say are good and not so good. Do not kill. Do not lie. Do not be a shit and steal everything from the people around you because you're not the only person on the planet. Share with other people and do unto others as you would like to have them do unto you. Just basic ethical concepts. And so if I were to say what is the good, I would say it's going to center around some of those basic ethical concepts of, really, I would prefer that people don't cut off my fingers, ergo I am not going to cut off other people's fingers. Do I think some humans get a little cross-wired and screwed up in their brains? Yes. That don't do that. Is that good? No, that's broken. And do we live in a cosmos where broken has a place? Possibly. But this gets down to like deep metaphysics of, do I understand why, these things have a place? Is it possible that some people want to experience both sides of that equation? Maybe. We talk about this a lot in the astrology community, at least I do. I don't know, people may be listening to me, but I don't know if they want to think about it. There are some astrologers that I do not approve of, that you will sit there and listen to me and I will speak and you will shut up because I have wisdom to offer you. I don't approve of astrologers like this because I don't think it's my place to tell people what their journey is, no matter how much learning I have in the process. And yet somebody might want that. And who am I to say that they can't not want that? And this gets down to the deeper levels of humanity that live in our subconscious, our souls, that we aren't quite aware of what they want, why they're here, what their plans are. So back to being a pluralist, I can imagine a world that has parts that I'm not aware of. And so it becomes a complicated thing. When do you stand up and say no? And when do you say, okay, well, I just don't understand it. And, you come down to having your own set of standards. I will not do that because I believe it's wrong. But maybe someday my standards will seem quaint and something compared to the new version of humanity at some point. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a very wishy-washy answer, but it's the best I can do.
Well, let me work on it a little bit. So in the beginning, you said that there seems to be universal ideas about what's right and wrong because cultures across the board tend to say things like don't kill other people.
Mm-hmm. It's rude.
Yeah, it is kind of not polite. So then, but then you went to a spot where you were saying, but maybe it has a place. Maybe evil has a place. So you're not really contradicting yourself. Then you say there is a difference between good and bad, but there is a place for bad. Bad exists.
Well, I would say that the moment you have the good, you are necessitating, well, what's not good. So because this is the nature of being physical, is that we live in some kind of polarity, some kind of duality. And maybe inherently behind all of this, the duality doesn't exist. But on a physical level, as long as I can punch you in the nose and you go, ow, then yeah, that there is some duality. I can tell the difference between me and not me. And this is where the concepts come from. And same with free will. The moment you allow some kind of a choice, you're going to be able to choose one or the other. And so in essence, what you might call not good, evil, could be conceived of as just the absence of good because we have choice.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, now it's coming clear to me what you're saying. So the evil can't be eradicated.
I don't think so. I don't, not in the way the world, not in the kind of world that we live in.
Right.
As long as we live in time, as
Right.
long as we live in duality, it's simply, what's the word, dukkha? It's simply what happens because we live in this three-dimensional construct, and we can choose not to go that way for whatever our standards are, because they're, anti-human, anti-earth, anti-planet, but we will always have that choice. And maybe that's part of the refinement of soul, is to learn that certain behaviors aren't going to help you. They're just going to cause you more suffering on some level.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
don't
sorry.
do them.
Yeah. All right. Now, so on this topic of polarity, we talked about right at the beginning. Actually, no, in the other video that we did, where you talked about lunar mansions and the lunar and solar zodiacs, we talked about how cool it is to have like a yin and yang married together. So, and also, whenever I think about magic or the deeper levels of philosophy, I always see things in terms of masculine principles and feminine principles. Like all the symbolism for me boils down to those two categories. So I'd like to ask the people that I interview, what do you think, like for example, in astrology, there's really like day, night, sun, moon, Mars, Venus. It's all very polarized like that. So what do you think is the essential difference between masculinity or maleness and femininity or femaleness?
I'm a Reiki master on top of everything else. And so I've done a lot of energetic healing on myself and with other people. And the easiest thing I could tell you is that masculine energy goes straight. It's direct, and it goes to just doesn't even look sideways like it has blinders on. Feminine energy is constantly doing this, back and forth and back and forth, and it's much more diffuse in its awareness, but it's also very powerful in that diffusion as well. So and because they feel so very different, I think it affects so many different things. But that's on an archetypal level. It gets complicated when you start talking about individual men and women or various particular planetary configurations, because nothing is just pure one or the other. And then our way of seeing it comes from our own limited reality bubble. And so we don't necessarily see it in a pure sense. And so, yes, I would say that astrology is a wonderful map of that masculine and feminine duality. But, you can't tell the difference between whether that chart is in a male body or in a female body. And even the biological physicalness is going to change how the equation plays out. So it just gets very, very complicated when you're talking about three-dimensional stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of like going from like 2 crayons to having a box of like 64,000 billion crayons. They're little shades in between. It gets
great.
Less simple.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
Do you believe in God, and can you tell us what you think? Like, why and what kind of God concept is this?
I do not believe in a man with a plan and a beard. I do have a constant sense that the universe itself is conscious in a way that's far beyond my understanding. But I never feel alone. So that's kind of a God with a big G. It kind of goes up into the hologram beyond my conception. Down here, as you sprinkle down all these different layers or dimensions or whatever you want to call them, you know, I still talk to my dead ex-boyfriend. He's dead, but he comes and visits once in a while, and he's there, and there's the spirits of people who are around me, and, you know, there are perhaps intermediary God-ish things that I feel moving in and out the planets. Could they be gods? So we're all on this great chain of being together. And I think how to answer that question is like, which level do you want me to talk about? Do you want me to talk about the grand universal thing that's beyond my level of comprehension that still feels vaguely conscious and responsive, or down to the level of, you know, my ancestor spirits who hang out from time to time?
So that's an answer. That's a good answer in and of itself. So there's divinity in various levels.
Yeah, and in divinity in you and divinity in me. We wouldn't say namaste. The divine within me salutes or nods and winks at the divine within you. And we are all partaking in some way, shape, or form with something bigger. And I think it's just our challenge that we are each aware of this in different ways.
Great. Thank you, Donna.
That was fun.
Did you have fun?
I did have fun.
I've been now on my video camera here for 3 hours straight now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you learning lots? Are you having fun?
Yeah, I'm having fun.
Okay.
I'm having fun. And it's my Friday, so I'm looking forward to my weekend.
Awesome.
All right. So
I hope this was productive for your series, and I'm honored that you invited me.
no, because I feel you're a very valuable person. You have lots of experience and research and information, and I like how you synthesize it, and I like how you express it.
Oh, well, it was a pleasure to be here with you, and I hope that your series brings you all the things that you were hoping to have from.
Thank you.
All right.
See you around.
Bye.
Bye-bye.